Hi, I'm J. Douglas Smith.
And I'm Greg Golding. We're here to tell you about synesthesia. Jason's actually one step above me because he's like 1 foot 1 inch shorter than me. Show that, I guess.
I'm the director and co-writer of Synesthesia. I first met Greg working on his film Struggled Reagans, and I was one of the cameramen on that. I'm also the writer, director, just kind of overall cameraman and editor for the period. This movie I made about a girl who had a never-ending sort of projectile period, and that eventually kind of gets her into the art scene, and she eventually there's this kind of sort of pagan religion. There's a lot of twists and turns to that. That's actually a movie that you can get on Netflix now. For a long time I was working on a movie called Aberrant Behavior, which is about people who have a form of the pica disorder where they eat things that aren't food, like household items and dirt and trash and household chemicals. It's kind of a metaphor for drug and alcohol addiction and destructive relationships and codependency, and these two characters that kind of were like living off the grid and were sort of addicted to each other and addicted to their disorder.
I am co-writer and producer of Synesthesia. I recently just finished my directorial debut with the feature film Struggled Reagans, due out in spring of 2011. Roll clips. Struggled Reagans is essentially the story of 6 young people that suffer traumatic experiences that create a tumor in the collective unconscious, and they then draw on the energy of that tumor to become this helmeted Power Rangers-like action squad. It's sort of based on Japanese tokusatsu storytelling, like Power Rangers, Godzilla, the type of giant robot, things mixed with their erotic fetishes and their sociological and philosophical concerns. Instead of being dinosaur themed, it's a kind of Jungian collective unconscious version of Power Rangers.
Synesthesia is basically about this woman who goes by Jane Doe in the script, who wakes up in the middle of the woods, bloody, no memory. She's naked and there's blood on the side of her head, and she's like black and blue, she's beaten. And anyway, she like kind of rambles through the woods until she finds herself along the highway, and she gets picked up in this pickup truck by this big, scary lumberjack character named...
Against her will, it's like an abduction.
Yeah, she's tied up and thrown into the back. She gets taken back to a cabin with a incestuous brother and sister and a domineering kind of motherly figure named Ms. Madalena. And
yeah, that's the wife and children of this guy. His name's Pluto. He's the guy that has basically brought her into the cabin as the new sex slave. They have this strange naturalist in the cabin sex slave type household.
Yes, and she sort of forms a sort of kind of dominant, submissive, sort of lesbian and sort of mother-daughter kind of relationship with the more dominant Madalena, as she tries to help teach her how to learn math and English and all the basic skills that you would need, and also help kind of bring her back into consciousness and help bring back some of her memory.
Because she's in such a regressive state where she doesn't know about human things, she's almost like the family pet sex slave, but it becomes really intimate, especially with Madalena. And it's around kind of this point in like late in the first act that we realize Jane has synesthesia, so a lot of it's subjective from her point of view.
Yeah, and we that's where you sometimes you might taste colors, or certain tastes might make you see different colors in your eyes, or maybe certain sounds may make you hear a color, or a certain color will make you hear a sound. It's basically where your senses are kind of mixed up, kind of cross-wired.
Yeah.
And we utilize that for a lot of crazy aesthetic purposes and sound design, and there'll be lots of weird floating color globules and weird coloring coming off of different people or objects.
So in addition to the story about Jane in the cabin, there's also a parallel narrative that runs through the whole film about this photographer named Hector that is kind of a guy with camera photographing models, like trolling the internet looking for a woman he's attracted to and people he's interested in, kind of experiencing the whole city and the whole community just through this Facebook parody that he's involved with. He's obsessed with this one model in particular, kind of a reality slash porn star that bears a very close resemblance to Jane. Now, the connection between this woman and Jane are obviously the same person. How they got from there to the cabin is kind of the mystery of the film. He keeps badgering this woman on the phone, badgering Jane on the phone, finally gets an appointment with her because she just wants him off his back with the incessant calls. He finally goes to her house and sees her murdered. At this point, instead of calling the authorities, he essentially goes on her profile, contacts all her friends, gets her a smartphone, and through all this, he basically has access to her apartment, her whole life, and starts playing the role of the consoling friend. But through this, he's just vicariously living his fantasy that he was part of her life. Basically, the two stories of Jane, the synesthesia victim in the incestuous family, and Hector, the photographer, finding her life and associates, finding her life accessible through basically technology and smartphones and the internet, kind of connect to this theme of information overload and the brain and processing and creating this nebulous, interconnected network of association and disassociation.
One of the things I want to do differently with the 3D format is I want to use a lot of handheld cameras and a lot of POV shots, and I kind of, so that you're like really into like the character's point of view, and we're going to do that a lot throughout the movie with the two main characters. And on top of that, we want to mix that with some endoscopic footage, which is what like medical cameras, and we're going to use that so that we can get like kind of a different kind of 3D feeling where you're like super absorbed into the action and it's like overly intimate. But we're also going to mix that with more traditional wider kind of 3D shots as well. So we think it's kind of a subversive act to make something that's really low budget and kind of gritty and graphic and transgressive, and kind of take away the 3D technology that's being used by these big budget movies. And there's a lot of new technologies that will allow us to do that, and we want to be one of the first ultra low budget kind of extreme movies to be in 3D. But in a weird way, we're going to be utilizing like new technologies and talking about new technologies, but at the same time making a film that's very modern but also has this kind of very like 70s kind of style, kind of like cult film kind of thing. So we're kind of playing with, and there was 3D movies back then too that, you know, of course not quite as good and with the technology, but so we're kind of playing a homage to those old kind of 3D 70s style cult films that were and erotic films, and then also kind of making a very modern movie at the same time. So we already have $10,000 to start the production of this movie, which we will be doing very shortly, but we think we will need an additional $10,000 to be able to finish that movie, be able to utilize all the required technology, and also be able to distribute it.